wipe them out, and the ones you don't get to, you don't deal with. You don't. What is it you don't do with the others? What does it tell you? Yeah, don't be marrying them. Now, there's two reasons for that. One is it'll destroy the genealogy chain of becoming through the descendants of Abraham if they intermarry with these other people and they lose who's who. Now, they did occasionally, we know of several that were not Jews. They weren't born Jews. They apparently became Jewish, what we call a proselyte. And the other reason is, which may be just as important, is that you marry someone who's not a worshiper of Yahweh, and the likelihood is they're going to keep worshiping their gods. That's one of the big problems that Solomon had with all of his wives and all of his concubines, is because most of them came from other countries. And they all brought their gods. They worshiped their gods. So Solomon was constantly torn by that, and it created problems in the whole nation. Anyone else care to share anything?
That's why unbelievers, unbelievers should marry unbelievers.
That would be the preference, but it doesn't always happen. I recall a story of a well-known preacher who was in a small congregation, and that's what he said. And afterwards, he was challenged by a young lady in her early 20s who said, the only single man in this church is John Smith, and he was like 80 years old, So, you can't always choose, and which is one of the reasons why many people go to a Christian college. When I went to Christian college, there were young women there that their challenge, their goal, was to find a husband within the first semester. And I had a young man who moved in beside me, and I was a sophomore, he was a freshman, and he got engaged before the Christmas holidays. Back then the semester went into after January, and he got married Christmas and didn't even finish the semester. And I said, don't you want to get an education? He says, what for? I'm just going to go back and be a farmer. His dad owned several thousand acres up in the Panhandle, and I'm sure he's quite happy being a farmer up there. But he came to get a Christian wife, and that is a wise thing if you can do that. Not always possible, and sometimes people risk grave consequences over that. I had an elder in Mississippi who thought the way to evangelize the world was to send our children out to marry non-Christians, because he had two daughters who married men who were not Christians, and they were both been converted. At that time, both of them were deacons. Right now, one of them is an elder in that same church. So I hear I understand the wisdom, but there's also the realities of life. All right. Yes, sir. Right. Well, yeah, and the fact that they're just beginning at this point, and they're much more vulnerable. Where when they started building the temple, they were a little better established. All right, question 11. Compare how verses 12 through 16 applied to Israel, but not to Christians. Question 11 on chapter 4 through 8, and it's specifically looking at verses 7, 12 through 16. Yeah, that's the other question sheet that we abandoned. I have it right here, but we're not using that one. I'll take 2. What does it say in that paragraph? Somebody want to read the verses for us? Yeah. Yeah. All right, he's sending them into this land to conquer. They have to first conquer the people. You're not conquering the land, you're conquering the people. And then that's going to be hard. And then they got to start making a life. You got to remember, this generation, they haven't been homesteaders, if you please. They've been wanderers. Living off the land in a scavenging sort of way. And God's been feeding them with manna and quail. All they had to do is go out and gather it. And now he says, basically, you're going to be a good farmer. I'm going to make sure of it. You follow my will, you obey my commands, your crops will grow, you'll have a big harvest, your animals will bear foal, whatever they are, chickens or, started to say pigs, but that's not right, lamb, sheep, things of that nature. But what does that kind of sound like in today's climate? Sound a little bit like the prosperity gospel? You become a Christian and God will make you rich, assuming you give enough to me. Or another approach could be, well, it might not hurt to offer a sacrifice to this idol. Maybe something good will come out of it. Maybe he'll bless me in some way. Because we're coming from a group of people at a time in history when they thought everything had a God. I mean, again, look at the plagues against Egypt. Those were direct attacks against the gods that Egypt worshipped. And what were some of those plagues? Flies? Locusts? Yeah. If I was going to make an idol, I wouldn't make one to a fly. Yeah. Yeah. But you got to understand, this is their science. Don't argue with the science, right? This is their science. Everything has a God. And so they've been in that mentality all of their life. And God says, you destroy all the idols. You destroy all the Asherah poles. There's two main gods that keep coming up. One is Baal, and the other is Asheroth. They're both gods of fertility. Baal is or Baal, depending on how the spelling is in your translation, is the fertility god for men, and the Ashereth pole is the fertility god for women. And that's it. It says you destroy all that stuff.
There are religions today, though, that even though they might say that their main focus is on like Muhammad or whoever, but they still see different goddesses and gods. There was a reference in a movie that was popular about a year ago. Anyway, and the young man that's the star in there mentions the goddess of the sea. Although he is probably from a Muslim religion, they still have it intertwined. So gods and goddesses along.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Wonder about these people crossing the ocean. You know, you pray to them, and nothing happens. But you keep praying. There's something good happens. Why do they keep doing them?
Well, but we could be challenged that way ourselves as Christians. Like we pray for somebody to get well and they die. Well, God didn't answer your prayer, so there is no God. So but it's a part of their thought process. It's how they're brought up. If you're brought up a certain way, hey, when I went in the first grade, they had just stopped trying to make left-handed children right-handed. They used to do that. If you went to school and you were left-handed, they would slap your hand. They'd hit it with a ruler. You do not write with your left hand. You write with your right hand. And they quit that the time I got there, which is a good thing because I had a couple of friends who were left-handed. But there's just that mindset. And if that's what we believe, if we all believe it, then it has to be true, right? Obviously that's not true, but if everybody thinks that, then that's the way we go. Stay away from the idols. Crush them, destroy them. Don't have anything to do with them. All right, observe the warning from 17 through verse 26. And sometimes it's hard even today to trust God and do things that we don't see the need in or the necessity of.
Especially if it's contrary to what you used to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think he's also enacting there in verse 17 a little bit of what they did 40 plus some years ago.
Yeah.
When the 12 spies went in to the promised land, 10 of them came back and said, these people are big, they're strong, we can't conquer them. But 2 of them said, no, we can do it with God's help. He's kind of throwing a little hook in there.
Yeah. Agreed.
God says, do it. Trust me. That reminds me,
Yeah.
God is for us, who can be against us? Like you said, it's hard to think before.
Now, we don't face the challenge of going in and conquering a foreign army, but we do face the challenge of conquering sin in our lives. And sin is not some butterfly or bird that flies in. It usually comes with a person. So sometimes our bravery has to do with facing a person and saying to them, sorry, I'm not going to do that. Or maybe it's a group of your peers. You're with a group of a half a dozen people and 5 of them want to go do something that you don't want to go do. What do you say? If it's, if you feel it's against God's will, it's going to be a sin, you say, I'm not doing that. I'm staying right here, or I'm going over there. So we don't go out and challenge foreign armies, but sometimes we have to challenge our friends. All right. Anyone else?
God is like that teammate that makes everybody around him better. Because they believe this guy kind of let us lose this game. So they do their best to play the game and win the game. So I had teammates that were, if he wasn't there, when he showed up, we're like, hey, we're going to win. He's here. God's there. We're going to win.
Yeah. And that's a hard concept for people to understand. From my own personal experience, when I was playing football, I was never first string. I finally made first string my last year, and that's when I quit. But thought I'm never going to get a scholarship. This is stupid. But those first stringers, when you would practice, when you'd have practice, the first stringers thought the junior varsity guys over here coming in and trying to, stop the play, treated them as enemies. But in reality, we're trying to make one another better. And sometimes your friends help you be better by challenging you. And that doesn't give us an excuse to hate them or say bad things about them. It gives us an excuse to be better and even thank them for that opportunity. Anyone else? Yeah. Give them that opportunity and the encouragement. You can do that. All right, question 13 says, clarify the danger which would face Israel. All right. And again, I've said this several times the last couple of weeks. This is like the last thing Moses has the opportunity to say to his people, to Israel. He reminds them of what they went through, even though they didn't go through it. Even today, when the Jewish people have their feasts, they talk as if when we cross the Red Sea, that's because it's to be personal, it's to be us. It's just as in when we have the communion and we commemorate the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, it's to remind us that, like, we're there. We need to be in that resurrection. We need to be there and see the crucifixion. We need to see the resurrection. And it has to become personal to us. And at the same time, he's saying to them, don't do what you did before. Of course, they weren't the ones, not all of them at least, who turned away and sinned against God. But some of them were, and he's reminding them, do the right thing, don't do the wrong thing. Anyone else? Questions, comments, remarks?
Old Testament, we talk
But our problem is we want it to happen immediately, and sometimes it doesn't happen as quick as we want it. And so we get angry at God at sometimes. Or some people even lose their faith. Chuck, would you mind sticking your head outside and see if Mike's okay? I think he just went to take a phone call, but let's make sure he's all right. No, he's out in the parking lot. All right, the last question, verse 19. What would happen if Israel turned away from God, or Yahweh? Say again? Yeah. Surely be destroyed. In other words, you don't have a guarantee if you don't follow me. All right, go ahead. All right.
Here, you can't do it right now, Kelly. His truck wasn't there.
Go ahead. But we don't like that kind of guarantee. We don't like that kind of guarantee. But it's sometimes what we call the other side of the coin. He did promise them. We noticed earlier, you do what I tell you and you're going to be blessed, your crops and your flocks. And now we got and if you don't follow me, if you go into idolatry or you go into other things, then you're going to be in trouble. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Again, the promises that he's making here to the Israelites are specific to them, but we see how many times they can have application to us as well. If we serve God, I believe we'll have a better life. Not necessarily that we will have all the great blessings and, we'll be rich and that kind of stuff, but it has to do with your attitude and your mindset. In reality, we have a lot of control over whether we're happy or not. Now, I know we like to have good things. I know we like to have good friends and all that stuff that makes life fun or exciting or different or whatever. But how many people do you know who have hardship and difficulty in their life, and yet somehow they're still happy. Have a smile on their face. Again, a lot of that is attitude. And they don't necessarily, in our concept, they don't necessarily have to be Christians. They're just people who have decided they're going to be happy. And I said a while ago a quote that a friend of mine used to say all the time, and I wanted to adopt it, but I can't remember to do it. His name was Jerry Bennett. He said, "Jerry, how are you? Greatest day of my life." Now, if you were close to him, as I was close to him, he might pull you off to the side and then tell you some of his troubles and ask for some counsel or advice. But when you just walk up to him and say, "How you doing today?" it's always the greatest day of his life. And he said it with a smile and many times a chuckle. But he had problems in his life. I know about them. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jerry's response was, "Yesterday's gone. Tomorrow may never get here. Today's the only day I got." So this is it. So it's the greatest. Now, if you want to reverse that, you could also say it was the worst, because this is the only day he's got. But he always emphasized it's the greatest day of my life. All right, anyone else? All right, I apologize for not having these questions to you sooner. But let's go to chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 1. I will look at verse 18 in chapter 8 again, simply because it has to do with the blessings that we were talking about earlier. Chapter 8, verse 18, he says, "But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your forefathers as it is today." So, follow God, Israel, and I'll bless you. And I would say that if we follow God, even if we're not the richest person in the world, we can appreciate what we have. I know you've probably heard this or read it or maybe even said it yourself. I grew up poor, but we never knew it. You know, everybody around us was poor, or we were happy and had a good time and ate good. Sometimes, you know. So it was the attitude that you had when you were brought up that was in your family, and you know, even in poverty, you see people who are smiling and happy and they're glad to be alive. So as a Christian, I think we can take that approach. Not that God's filled my pocket with $100 bills. All right, the first question we said, offer some reason of Moses' statement in verse 1 and following. FF means the following verses. Yeah. And it's true, wasn't it? It's true for them, it's true for us. Anyone else want to comment on that? Little giants. No. All right, if you looked at verse 6, read verse 6 for us, somebody. You are a what? Okay. What's God saying here? Restate it in some way. Reword it. Stiff-necked, prideful, stubborn. What else? Yeah. Okay. You know, I can't remember the player's name. I used to know it. But there was a really good basketball player that was not liked by his team. Now, he was a star. He got all the attention. And someone, perhaps his coach, told him, when you score a point, it's usually because someone has passed you the ball. So when you score that point, you recognize him. And you may not remember the guy's name either, maybe some of you do, but if you ever see, not playing anymore, but if you ever see any old videos, he'll score a point and he'll turn the point. He'll point to the guy that threw him the ball. So he's saying, thank you. You are a part of this too. So even though he was a multi-million-dollar basketball player who got people to come and buy tickets because he was so exciting to watch him play, he came to the point where he realized being arrogant, stiff-necked, stubborn wasn't doing him any good. And as he began to give other people credit, guess what happened? Started getting more passes thrown to him. Started scoring even more points because he helped with the team. Anyone else have anything to share? Yeah. Yeah, what's that thing? There's no I in team? Yeah. So the whole point being is that we need to be in harmony with God, and we need to not be taking credit ourselves. And accomplish great things. And somebody stands off to the side and says, how did y'all do that? Because they see that there's no superstar in the group. Well, it's because we work together. We're a team. I like that. Hmm? Yes? Right. Yeah. Question 5, well, jump ahead. That says count the number of times he calls them stiff-necked. You know, just in that chapter or that section. Yeah. The arrogance. Yeah, I know we have all kind of sins in our lives that we battle with, lust of the flesh, pride of life, lust of the eye. But I think arrogance may be very close to the top of the list, because that's when we are assuming power. It's me, it's not God. And in that stiff-necked stubbornness, we think we're super. But we're really not. You know, and you take any type of sport, the TV camera goes up with a microphone, they stick it in front of the coach's face, and he'll say, well, we were a good team or something like that. You know, we did well. But when you approach the players, it's rare for one of the players to say, Coach really did this for, you know, he brought us together. And, you know, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but in the team that they always have to thank everybody who was there. But at this measure, I'm sort of comparing the coach to God. And it's hard for us, it seems, to give God the credit. And we want to say, hey, you know, quarterback threw me that pass and I ran for a touchdown, yada, yada, yada. And it's like me and a quarterback. And you think, no, there were other players out there doing things as well. And you back up a little bit more, and where did you learn all that stuff? Your coaches did it. They brought you to that point. So you go into battle, you're a great fighter, you win your battles, you conquer the cities. Remember, it didn't happen because you were super righteous, meaning it didn't happen because you were God. Because God blessed you. Not good. Anyone else?
Even if it were just you alone, say every other teammate on the field fell down and the coach gave up, whatever. Even if you alone, you have to remember God made your body, gave you the extra strength in
Yeah.
those muscles. All the word of God gave you the brain to understand.
Yeah. And sometimes in life it is us alone, like when David faced Goliath. You know, there wasn't any team there. It was his faith. All right. Question 3. Give your favorite point or lesson from the story about the golden calf. You know that story? You can read it real quick there if you want to, but you know the story. Moses comes down from the mountain with the Decalogue, stone tablets. And what happened with what does he see? And what's the explanation for its existence? Yeah, they figured Moses was gone. He'd been gone so long. So we're on our own. So what do we got to do? We got to find us a God. Yeah. You know, it's been many years ago, but someone made the statement that it seems inherent in humankind to want to recognize a God and to worship. That they had gone to remote places and found indigenous natives who hadn't had contact with really anybody else or any other religions, and yet they were worshiping something. You know, it may have been fish or whatever, it doesn't matter, but they were worshiping something. So Moses hadn't come down. And how does this golden calf appear? You know, when they were leaving Egypt, God told them to go to your Egyptian neighbors and borrow from them. So when they left Egypt, they left with a boatload of money, a bunch of gold. Not paper dollar bills, but a bunch of gold. Now, I don't know about you, but I know as human beings we've done a lot of crazy things in life. I see people spending their money on things and I scratch my head and say, why in the world would anybody, in my opinion, waste their money buying that particular thing? Why would the Israelites waste their gold to create an idol? I don't know. Hungry for a God. But the question says, what is your favorite point or lesson about that?
We're all human, want something to follow, so,
Okay. Yeah. Yep. We admire them for turning back to God, but we wonder why they turned away from God.
but it's so easy for us to turn away from God. I mean, whether it's through temptation
Yeah.
or what, I mean, basically we're a weak people.
So before we get too critical about the Israelites, we need to understand we kind of fit in the same boat. So whatever their temptation was, we need to ask ourselves, what's my temptation? What causes me to lose faith in God? And there sometimes comes, I sort of get back up on my feet and I turn back to God. That's good. That's what God wants. He wants us with Him. But we have to look at our own individual lives and ask ourselves, what's the real threat to my faith? Wow. And if you figure that out, what do you do then? Okay? If you go to AA or NA, one of the addiction 12-step groups, one of the first things you have to do is what?
Admit that you have a problem.
Right. You recognize you got a problem.
Because if you can't admit it, you're never going to overcome.
Right. So, still using the alcohol just as an illustration, if I can't figure out why I get drunk every weekend and beating up on my wife and kids, and then I do figure it out, what I need to do is quit buying the beer, quit buying the alcohol, if I get that figured out. Now, I'm not limiting to that. I'm just saying if we figure out what it is in our life that's short-circuiting our faith, we need to figure out a way to avoid it or remove it. Anyone else?
Well, were you going to cover any more about the golden calf?
We will. Go ahead.
One of the things I think about is that there was pride involved in all of this, where they made it on God for one thing. Deuteronomy stops a little bit short about what happened with the calf. Moses approached the calf, saw the calf, his anger burned, threw the tabernacle and broke the pieces. Anyway, he burned it, and then he scattered the dust of the calf into the water flowing down
Yeah.
And my first thought was, they swallowed their pride.
Mm-hmm. Swallow their pride. Good. So what had been treasure, let me illustrate it another way. This is the equivalent of you donating hundreds or thousands of dollars and then God burning up your $100 bills. You know, would you have, if you had a $100 bill, would you put a match to it and burn it? No. Well, what if you had a stack of them? Would you burn them? No. Well, that in effect is what God has done to their gold. That they dedicated to an idol, to a false god. And now it's been turned into refuge, waste. All right, good. Anyone else? Why did the Levites not receive a portion of land like the other tribes? Chapter 10.
Well, they were the priestly tribe. They had interactions with people in that context. They had a place within, I guess, each tribe to serve in that purpose.
So they were to devote their attention to the temple and the service there. But how many could go in the temple, the tabernacle? Only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies, and the rest of them had to stay outside. And even if you packed that place, what would it hold? Maybe 100? So they had other responsibilities. Perhaps it was counseling, encouragement. But their responsibility was to be the religious leaders. We don't know how they fulfilled all those obligations. It sounds like they were a bunch of freeloaders in one way, but they were not. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, our time is up. We will start with question 5 next week, which you've already touched on, and we will go back over any of the previous questions we've talked about. If you want to think of something else and you want to share that, we'll do that next week. Thank you for your participation. Appreciate it very much.